Eli Valentin,
Yes,
how are you, man?
I'm I'm great. I'm great. Thank you for having me. And I'm glad you're back.
Yeah, man. You go back, from to the beginning, and I was thinking about you a whole lot, um, and how important your voice is as well. Simply because there aren't too many of us. There
Yeah.
aren't too many of us trying to elevate and promote and ask the questions, because that's the other thing. It's not just it's the why. Why aren't we? Just in my, I'm kind of cynical, I guess, because I don't see it. I don't see it, and that's why I have you on, because I want to just cover just a couple of things. Do a year end check in. Um, Talk about the year in terms of politics, and then any predictions and thoughts that you have going in. But I want to start, Eli, with a post mortem. I know you wrote a piece for City and State on Latino turnout in general. And I want to just sort of, you could just walk me through some of the takeaways, because, the election was only a month ago. And depending on who you ask, overwhelmingly, we were blamed.
Yeah.
We were blamed. I don't care how anyone spins it, and we were blamed. So I want to hear your thoughts on what were the main takeaways, and hopefully what are the lessons learned, or need to be learned. And so I'll shut up and let you sort of riff a bit on your thoughts.
Yeah, no. And again, thank you for having me. It's an honor. I will say that Latinos tend to be um the easy scapegoat. And that's pretty much always been the case. And it seems that it's happening again. And I will say that a lot of this is pure junk, and I say that because and I think once voter files are updated, and by each state election entity does what they need to do, we're going to get a clearer picture as to what happened, and specifically how things looked when it came to quote unquote the Latino vote. But I think what happened is that there was a narrative after the election based on a narrative based on faulty exit polling that suggested that there was a defection among Latino voters, and uh, that defection, if you will, contributed to Donald Trump's victory. So, I mean, I think it's important to emphasize the faulty exit polling. Exit polling is, to begin with, is always spotty. Not everyone does it right, and especially when it comes to Latinos, uh, there are even less entities out there that get it right. So one of the few like AP Votecasts, they're one of the better ones when it comes to especially Latinos and measuring the Latino vote. And people like AP Votecast, they were like, there was a decline um, in terms of right Latinos voting for the Democratic candidate at the top of the ticket, but it's clear that it wasn't a defection. And what I'm seeing in New York and New York City specifically, as I wrote in City and State, is that we can't call this a defection. I see more of this being a repudiation by many Latinos that are discontented, that are upset about um, a number of things, many of which they blame on right the Biden administration and those in executive levels in New York that are in executive right positions. So I think that is what's happening. And like I said at the beginning, I think voter files, once they're updated, right, we see voting patterns based on right, actual voters, I think that'll give us an even clearer picture. But yeah, but I would certainly discourage people from using the defection lingo. Yes, more Latinos voted for Trump. That much is clear, and we cannot discount that at all. That's a fact. That's a reality. I just wouldn't call it a defection. And what we're seeing right now, numbers wise, is that it is not that.
Eli, so okay, so if it's what would you say were three things, policy things, or
Mm.
issues that turned off Latinos? Read Biden, read
Yeah,
Democrats.
yeah, no,
Bread and butter. Give
excellent.
me the bread and butter things that you said made Democrats go from, I think it was 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10 voted
Yeah,
Obama, and I think the numbers were the same the last round for Biden.
right.
Um, why the sudden turn? What do you think were the three things if you were to pick three things that turned Latinos off?
The economy. The economy was always right.
The
The
economy's
top
stupid,
priority.
right?
Huh?
It's the economy stupid, right? The old
It's the
Clinton line is
economy.
what I'm saying.
Right, absolutely. And you know what? And it's interesting for Latinos is it's always been about the economy because unfortunately Latinos have always been at the lower tiers of the economic ladder. That's a fact. And there's this perception that immigration is the issue for Latinos, and that's not the case at all. And we see that especially after the pandemic, the situation economically was much more dire for Latinos than other ethnic groups. So the economy was number one, and there were many that were clearly dissatisfied by what they felt was an inadequate attention to the economic situation of the country by Biden. So that's one: economy, public safety, and immigration. Not necessarily in that order, but certainly those are the other two issues that were important for Latinos. And again, among many, there was a dissatisfaction on those issues as well when it came to how the Biden administration handled these issues. So yeah, I would say those are the three that we consistently saw right through public polling and even anecdotally. I mean, we're out there, and we hear and we see what's happening, and those are those three issues were consistently on the minds of Latinos.
Eli, I'm going to put you on the spot. Two Latinos of Puerto Rican descent, 2024, we're closing out. Who was, out of the two, who was the biggest winner in 2024? And would you call one of them a loser? Congressmember
Wow.
Alexandria Ocasio Cortez and Congressmember Richie Torres.
Mm,
What
wow.
did
That's
what did the Trump outcome, the election, mean for those two members of Congress, both representing the Bronx? Obviously, Congressmember Ocasio Cortez represents parts of Brooklyn, but she's calls herself the Latina from the Bronx. But I want to hear
yeah.
your thoughts on what the Trump election meant to both candidates and their place within the Democratic Party, the state of New York, and the city of New York.
Yeah.
And
Well,
here's why I mentioned Richie. I've had three conversations with three people that write for the New York Post, and all three are sort of, they can't say enough about Richie.
mm,
Right, and there was the vote for the Congressmember Ocasio Cortez that the outcome didn't work in her favor, where she even made a joke, a back and forth with President Trump, um, and it seems like the appetite seems to be more in the middle, more right of center. And people are. What someone said that she changed the surnames on her Twitter feed. Whether that's attributed to that, you know, I don't know.
yeah.
But I want to hear your thoughts on what the outcome meant for both politicians within their party.
Well, I think that that for AOC specifically, um, we see. Well, let me preface what I'm about to say by saying the following. It's interesting that in many parts in Queens that she represents, um, especially like the more Latino majority areas,
Mm-hmm.
we see a lot of voters that voted for Trump that in all likelihood also voted for AOC, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So right,
they
that
split the vote. Yeah.
they split the vote, right? So and, and it's interesting because you could say fairly easily that these two public figures are right diametrically opposed on issues, and how could that be? But I think there's more to explore there as to how that happened or why that happened. But in either case, I would say that if there is one thing, very interestingly, that does align AOC with much of what Trump has postulated, is that they're both against a system that they believe has failed many, right? So, and by the way, I would put in Bernie Sanders in there too, right? I mean, in some sense, there's a similarity in that in looking at that, but
Mm-hmm.
right, how they get there and the path that they take there, obviously, that's different. But in either case, I think there's much to explore there, especially when it comes to Latinos, uh, some of which voted for Trump and AOC. So I think
Mm-hmm.
there's much to say. But I think Trump will be a punching bag for AOC. I don't think that the result of that internal baseball committee vote is going to hurt her. Her base is solid, right? And she has a following.
Oh yeah.
So
Oh yeah.
and I think
And
him
look.
being president gives her
Oh,
gives her a
absolutely.
punching bag.
The standard bearer of the party, the president, is taking. I mean, that's good. That means you're irrelevant.
Right.
That means you're important. And I meant to say
Exactly.
gender pronouns, and I didn't. I meant to use the term, surname, but I meant to say gender identity and pronouns. That's what I meant
Hmm.
to say. But either way, I think it's impressive and speaks to the weight and the power that the Congress member has been able to amass with her constituency and huge
Yeah.
following, that the president feels a need to sort of take a shot at her, poke fun at her. So, but let's move to
Yeah.
Richie Torres now, Eli.
Oh man, Richie Torres. I'll say this: some years ago, I wrote a piece for Gotham Gazette on Richie. It was titled the pragmatic progressive. I'm sorry, the pragmatic progressivism of Richie Torres. I was highlighting the then true growth of Richie Torres, and I always saw Richie Torres. Uh, I saw a lot of potential, and by that I mean potential in terms of electability, right? I think that may have been before he actually won the congressional seat, but I think many of us knew he was already looking at higher office, even when he was in the city council. So, I mean, I would say, right, Richie has lots of abilities. He's a great communicator, and he is able to parse out complex policy issues in a way that's digestible and understandable to your regular folk, right? So he will continue to make a splash, and in some sense, I'm not surprised, right, that he's teasing this possibility of taking on Kathy Hochul in 2026. And if he does that, I would say watch out,
Mm.
because I yes, Richie Torres outside of his congressional district, is he known? Yeah, we could say he's still an unknown entity to a wider public and a wider electorate. But I will say this: I think Richie will have the capacity to raise enough money to be a formidable candidate, and that in itself will allow him to gain more attention, uh, and more recognition outside of his congressional district. I think he appeals, and he can appeal to many because of this certain pragmatism that he, espouses, and he's an Afro Latino, so that's a demographic that's certainly important in any statewide Democratic primary. So I would say, Richie's one to watch.
He doesn't. He has 10 million. My understanding, he already has $10 million in the kitty.
Yeah, he can raise
Whether that
money.
money is that money transferable?
No, that money is not. That's not necessarily transferable because it was raised for what is a federal political committee.
Hmm.
He would need to establish a
But the
state
fact that he
committee.
can raise that amount of
But
money,
that's the thing.
I
He
mean,
can he
it is. I mean, that's impressive.
Yeah, it is, and in that sense, it's transferable, right? I mean, he can't transfer the money from one committee to the other, but yes, he can transfer the amount that he raised and replicate that to a state committee. He has that potential, and we see, he's been staunchly right pro-Israel, and I mean, I think there's a certain um, he he's genuine about his position. I think that comes across, and we have to say, that's helped them raise a lot of money from a certain sector that strongly believes in right, that's pro-Israel. So I think he could take advantage of that and launch a statewide campaign that could be credible. So yeah, I
Eli,
mean, I
Eli,
think he's one to
Eli.
watch.
If conceivably, if Richie were to throw his hat in the mayoral race, do you think he's got? Which would you, if you were advising Richie Torres, what would you say is his best chance at winning?
Yeah,
The mayoral race or the governor's race?
well, I think it's true. I think the window has closed when it comes to the mayoral race. We're 6 months away from the primary. It's crazy to think that, we're just 6 months away. And I think that to raise the money that's needed and to build the infrastructure that's needed to launch a citywide in such a short amount of time, I think is almost impossible. So I don't think that's a viable path for someone like Richie at this point. But I think there's time for him to build an infrastructure that necessary for a statewide race. Obviously, statewide is much more complicated and difficult, but when it comes to the timing issue, I think that's a more viable path for Richie.
Eli, what do you make of the Latino candidates currently in the mayoral race? What's your analysis on what you've seen so far in terms of their campaign, in terms of their messaging? And I'm talking about Senator Jessica Ramos and Senator Zona Myrie.
Yeah. Well, I would say the one positive here is that we are seeing we are seeing the development of a new generation of Latino political leadership in New York. And I believe that Jessica Ramos and Zelnor Myrie are representatives of that generation, right? I could think of others like Sean Abreu in Manhattan, right? Councilmen. These are younger elected officials that Latino. Then I believe all of them have bright futures, have a lot of potential. So I would say positive. Think about this, Roberto. When was the last time that that we ever saw more than one Latino candidate running citywide or running for the mayoralty, right? I mean, we've only really had two, Germán Badillo and Freddy Ferrer, and only one of those actually won the Democratic nomination. That was Freddy Ferrer, right, in 2005. So we haven't had really a viable, credible citywide candidate since Freddie, so it's something, right, that we have two now running. So that's a positive thing, and I hope that that's a trend, right, in the right direction. I think there's a lot that our Latino political leaders have to offer and that contribute. Now, the negative thing is that I don't see Ramos nor Myrie gaining any traction. And so in that sense, I don't think that, I mean, there's still time, right? But right now, I don't see any traction when it comes to fundraising, which is obviously so critical at this early stage. But also, number two is gaining action in terms of increasing name recognition and really putting out there a plan for the future of New York City. So I don't see that developing right now. I wouldn't consider, because of that, I don't consider Ramos or Myrie right now to be in the first tier of the competitive candidates for the mayoralty.
If you're advising them, if you were advising both of them, let's start with Senator Ramos. What would you advise them to do more of? Right? I know. What would be your recommendation in terms
Well,
of
I mean,
the playing field currently? Sort of the tea leaves as to where things are politically in the city, state, and the federal level. What would you
yeah.
advise them to do more of?
Well, I mean, the practical thing is raise the money, right? I mean, without money, you
Show
can't
me
get
the
your
money.
message across. Show me the money. That's it. That's number one, and that shows, for many, that shows viability. But beyond the viability factor, there's a practical factor here. That without the money, you can't get your message across, right? So that's number one. But number two is, I think that messaging is important, right? And messaging entails having the right platform that speaks to the concerns of the people, and you got to flesh that out, right? And you got to flesh that out in a way that's going to get the attention of the electorate, and it's going to get the attention of the wider media, right? And I don't see that developing right now. And there's I think it's missing. So those are the two things I would say.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the Latino vote last round, first time with ranked choice. And where did you
Mm.
see what trends did you see? Obviously the winner was Mayor Eric Adams, but in this ranked choice world, how do you see how do you see it playing out this time around?
So two things. The first thing I think about is turnout. And I have to say that I've been a little concerned about turnout among Latino voters. And one of the things I say in that city and state piece that you refer to at the end is that my fear is a real concern that I have, is that many Latinos are choosing not to participate in the voting process. So since 2018, what I've seen is 2018 was kind of like the peak of voting participation for Latinos in New York. After 2018, we have seen a steady decline.
Why was 2018? Why was 2018 so special?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I mean, 2018, we had the gubernatorial, both the primary and the general election, and that was Andrew Cuomo. So Andrew Cuomo had a both a primary, right, and a general election. So that was happening in 2018. It was also 2 years after Donald Trump victory, right? So and I think that there was a heightened awareness um, in terms of the importance of voting. I think people became much more civically engaged, or at least aware, right? Um, and I think there's a certain Trump effect to that. Now, I think that may have turned into fatigue, right? The level of information that people were digesting was just so I think so severe as a result of that. Was another Trump effect, I think. Um, right? So that's one factor. I think, did COVID play a role? Maybe, 2020. But I think it's more than COVID. I think there's a real dissatisfaction among Latinos that they're now expressing, not at the ballot box, but by not participating at all. So, it's very interesting. One of the things I point to in the article is that when I look at voter registration trends among Latinos the last 4 years, I'm seeing a 57% decline in voter registration compared to the previous 4 years. So, so I think that's really important. So to go to your question, I think number one is turnout. Will Latinos come out and vote? Here's the thing: we have over 1 million Latinos that are registered to vote in New York, right? I mean, it's a big group. Most of them are Democrats. So clearly, if they come out and vote, they can swing an election. That's that much. So that's number one. The first thing is turnout. Number two, looking at 2021, Eric Adams did win the Latino vote, right? And it was more so in the Bronx than in other places. He wins a plurality in other places like Queens, right, and Manhattan. In the Bronx, he wins a majority, which was pretty impressive, considering that there were many people that were candidates, right? So that was impressive. I will say off the bat, that will not happen for Eric Adams again among
Why?
Latinos, right? Well, I think that the
Why?
whole the the level of dysfunction that we have seen is something that's really palpable among Latinos, and yeah, there's the lack of leadership that we've seen, the indictments and all that. That's not going to play well with Eric Adams.
Que-
So I think, yeah, that's going to be a big one.
Question: has he been a good mayor for Latinos based on his policy?
I have to say no, he has not. Um, you know, he has not. I can't think of any signature achievements that I can point to that would make me say, wow, he has helped. You know, uh, he has helped the plight of Latinos, and improved, right, conditions here or there. I can't point to a signature achievement, right? Um, and I think he's just been distracted with all these investigations and indictments that he hasn't been able to do anything. And I think we're going to see that when it comes to, I think not just the Latino vote, but in general. I think that he's certainly among Latinos. We'll see a decline in support. And by the way, I'm going to add, it doesn't matter which Latino electeds endorse Eric Adams,
Mm.
right? These endorsements does not easily translate into votes, and we see that especially with Latinos and
Mm.
Latino voting patterns. So I just don't see the same level of support this time around because of all those reasons.
Question now, in that vein, what about Governor Hochul? What do you think her policies and some of her announcements and rollouts? How have they been helpful or impactful when it comes to Latinos?
I think the jury's still out with Hochul. Uh, you know, I I I can see that there's an attempt, right, to do the right thing, and to right really help the people of New York, and obviously by consequence, right, Latinos. I think this jury, I think the jury's clear on Eric Adams, not so much with Kathy Hochul. And the thing with Hochul is, I think that she also has time, to she has all of 2025 before her reelection, to really make a stamp, and there's time for a signature achievement or two in 2025 that she can point to that can help her, and more importantly, that can help the people of New York. So I think there's still time for Hochul. I'm not seeing, there's not enough data out there yet, but I'm not seeing Latinos, uh, going away from Hochul at this point. I don't see that happening. And again, I think there's time for her to really shore up her base, and her level of support, especially among Latinos.
Eli, do you see a Latino right now across the board that could be mayor of New York City, that could put it together? All right, Ruben Jr., Ruben Diaz Jr., Richie Torres, Congressmember Alexandria Ocasio Cortez, Congressmember Espaillat. I'm talking about the ones that have
Yeah,
um, Congressmember Nydia Velasquez. I don't know. I'm just throwing
yeah,
names out there. Is there any Latino right now that could be mayor?
that's a great.
You're saying right now that if Zelna Myrie and Senator Ramos could raise the money, that would increase the likelihood.
I'm
What are your thoughts? Is there anyone
I'm
out of those folks I
mhm.
mentioned, or maybe someone I missed, who you say is ready for prime time?
Wow, that's a great one. I've been having a tougher time, thinking about this question. I think about it often. It's interesting that we have a slight increase in Latino political representation, but I can't say that, um, there's anyone right now that we can easily point to as Mineral Timber, right? I would say, if maybe Richie Torres, although obviously this cycle, it's not going to happen for the reasons I mentioned before. But in terms of gravitas, in terms of political ability, I would certainly rank Richie Torres, up there. Yeah, I could certainly see that. Jessica Ramos, I think she's someone to watch also. I don't think it'll happen this cycle, but I think it's good for her to get her name out, and to show her abilities to a wider public. I think that will only help her. So I again, I think there's potential. It's not easily identifiable, I think, at this point. I think outside of the names that I've mentioned.
Eli, let's move to the sort of the power Latinos, the power in the Latino community. Who would
Yeah.
you say, right? And I love to ask this question because I'm a big fan of the way Dennis Rivera moved. I'm a big fan of the late Hector Figueroa. I thought that they were folks that had vision, folks that used both union leaders, but they used it to build a sort of a pan Latino power structure, right? They elevated different groups, um, and were influential. Let's face it, right? Hector had a lot to do with the undoing of the IDC, uh, and the Senate majority. Dennis, I mean, we can point and highlight to different folks he elevated within the union, and him using his electoral the union as to push candidates and to help elect a lot of folks that went on to bigger and better things. Um, who are some Latinos today, or maybe I missed some from that era, right?
Mhm.
Um, give me some Latinos today. Name three again, they don't necessarily have to be elected. They could be elected. They
Hmm.
could be in government. They could be labor leaders that you think, one, have coattails, two, have power. And sometimes Latino political leadership is not necessarily getting folks elected. It could be getting
Right.
folks appointed
Right.
to high
Right.
levels in government. Hey, leaning in on representation for all.
Right.
Who are
Right.
some of the folks you're impressed with?
So I would certainly say Congressman Adriano Espaillat is high on that list
Why?
for his ability to help some of his folk get elected. Um, and 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 obviously, right within the congressional district that covers Upper Manhattan and a big chunk of the of West Bronx. I mean, uh, from city council to state assembly, um, you know, not so much Senate, right? There was some beef there with Robert Jackson. Things didn't work out for Adriano the way he was hoping to, but he certainly, he got his share of victories, and I think that says a lot about what he's able to put together, um, that not only benefits him but benefits those that he supports, and that's real. I mean, I can't think of anyone else among Latino electeds, maybe to a lesser degree Nydia Velasquez in Brooklyn, but I think that Adriano has been able to do it, I think, at a grander scale. Again, I think it's confined within his congressional district, but that's still, it's, I think it still says a lot.
One of the things I must say, of a Congress member is also his willingness to fight.
Yeah.
He won't walk away from a fight, right? We saw what he did recently in East Harlem.
Yep.
Um, we saw what he did in the Northwest Bronx there with this recent race. So,
Yep. Yep.
kudos to him. Win, lose or draw, he's willing to lean
Yeah.
in. He's
That
willing to lean in.
absolutely
Who
got
who
him.
Go ahead. Who else is on the
No.
list?
Yeah, no, I think Nydia to a lesser extent. By the way, Adriano, right? He was supported Eric Adams. I believe he was first with Scott Stringer,
Yes, that's
but after
correct.
the Scott situation, he went over with Eric, and I think that has helped Adriano get some of his folk right in the administration and whatnot, right? So, like you said, this is not only about elected representation, but it's also representation within right spheres of government, and that's important. So I think Lydia to another extent is important, especially in Brooklyn. You mentioned labor leaders. We have Henry Garrido, right? Uh, DC 37, and what's interesting is I mean certainly right. Garrido is a player. Uh, but it's interesting when we compare to like a Dennis Rivera, though. Obviously 1199 was bigger. Um, but even Figueroa, I don't see the same level of influence that those other two were able to exercise. But I mean, we have to include Henry Garrido there because DC 37 is certainly a power base for Democratic candidates that aspire to citywide and statewide office. So I would include Garrido in that list.
So those that's two, and who's the third?
Well, Nydia Velasquez, so
Nitty,
Adriano,
I'm sorry,
Nydia,
apologies. Yeah.
yeah, and I would say Henry Garrido. I think those are the three I would say have I think most influence. What I mean by influence, right, is the ability to um it's the ability, like in the case of Adriano, right? It's not just about him. It's about using his own organization to come out and get his people elected.
Yeah.
That's real, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's real influence.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I mean, I think those three. We have so many electeds, right?
Yeah.
But I think that there are
Yeah.
very
And I
few
think in the
Latino electeds
case,
that are able to do that.
Eli,
Hmm.
in the case of Congressmember Velasquez, I know that and Reynoso credits her with grooming him and El Dominicano, and that's right, meaning going across the different groups. And
Yeah,
I remember former council member Menchaca, singing her praises as well. And
right,
he's of
right,
Mexican descent, which again speaks to that larger, pan Latino push, for all the
right,
different groups and bringing the unity together.
right.
So yes, I know I agree with you there. Now,
By the way, let me just say real very
please,
quickly,
please.
like you said, outside of electeds, um, yeah, I would have to say Luis Miranda, Roberto Ramirez. They
Hmm.
still have
Yes,
a
yes,
lot of
yes,
influence.
yes.
I mean, think about this. They're the Hamilton Campaign Network, right? Which is and not an offshoot. They're part of the Miram Group, which is more the lobbying arm. But they have Eric Gonzalez, right? That they helped elect as a Brooklyn District Attorney. They got Tish James, State Attorney
Hmm.
General.
Yes.
And they've been able to use their campaign consulting uh, prowess to help elect many folk, not just Latinos, but many folk at all different levels of government. So, I mean, I think that they will certainly have to be put on that list.
And you can't forget the Latino Victory Fund. They're very involved in that as
Yes,
well, and
exactly.
that's a national play, which is impressive.
Right.
E-
Absolutely.
Eli, draw them. Give me the biggest winners and losers in your mind for 2024, and then I'm going to put you on the spot for predictions for 2025.
Yeah. Well, biggest loser is Eric Adams. Um, I mean, I that's the goat of losers for
Mhm.
2024 because I mean, yeah, I I can't think of any other mayor, um, especially first-term mayor, that has dealt with the issues that he's inflicted on himself. I mean, we could think of Koch third term, but even that Koch third term, it was not at the level that we see here, and it was really never directly Koch. Right here, we see more some direct involvement or stuff pointing to Eric Adams specifically. I mean, it's been uh, it's been abysmal to put it lightly and diplomatically. And I mean, yeah, I don't see. I'm not saying it's a slam dunk that he won't get elected. I just don't see it happening. I just don't see it happening. So I have to say, I think that's the biggest loser in 2024,
Interestingly enough,
without a
in
doubt.
that city and state thing of predictions, a lot of consultants are
Yeah,
are picking him to get reelected.
yeah,
What do you
I know.
attribute that to?
Yeah, listen, and I will say this: I
You
have
haven't been
much
bashful so far, Eli. So don't run
yeah,
away from me now. Right?
I'm not. I have to say, I respect each and every one of them. George Arts, or which he, as we would say in Spanish, él es una leyenda. He's a legend. And and Camille, I respect highly. I have to say this. I think that there are many consultants that have to be mindful and careful, especially in this current political context, with conventional thinking. Um, the conventional thinking in this case is Eric Adams has the bully pulpit as a result of him being mayor, right? So, he's going to be able to raise money. He will be able to put the infrastructure together. That's the conventional thinking. And I think, right, the conventional thinking works when you have someone that's not as dysfunctional as Eric Adams, right? So there's the possibility that some may be misreading the current climate and how people really feel about Eric Adams and how dissatisfied they are by the dysfunction in City Hall. So I would not, if I would have been asked by City and State for my prediction, I certainly would not have said, because of those reasons, I certainly would not have said that Eric Adams is almost all, he's going to be reelected easily. I don't think they said easily, but I just don't see the possibility. And I would add that in all likelihood, he will not get matching money from the city campaign finance board, right? So they made an initial determination for this round, but I see this happening for the rest of the cycle, where the campaign finance board will not disperse public money because of all the situations, that the legal situations he's dealing with. So he has to compensate for that loss. And we're talking about millions of dollars to someone that, many are seen as vulnerable. I don't know how many will want to invest and take a chance because they see a level of, like radioactive activity around Eric Adams. So yeah, I would be careful with that conventional type of thinking.
Eli, so who were the winners then? Okay, Biggest Losers noted. Who were the winners? Who do you think won the year?
Well, I mean, locally,
hmm However, brother, it's your show.
yeah.
It's your platform here.
Well, I mean, look, I think nationally, the winner is Donald Trump,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Right. I mean, we, I certainly disagree with everything about, and that is Trump, but he won, right? And he won in a way that many folk did not expect. Again, by the way, he did the same thing in 2016. This time, though, he not only won every swing state and won the electoral college vote handily, he also won the popular vote. People were not expecting that either. And by the way, I was one that thought that if he did win, that he would win the electoral college vote, win the presidency. If he did win, and I thought it was 50-50, but if he did win, I didn't think he would win the popular vote. So, he proved so many of us wrong. I mean, we gotta, at some point we gotta give it to him, right?
Yeah. We
He
all got egg
he
on our
he.
face. We all got egg on our face.
We gotta, exactly. So I mean, and locally, I don't know if anyone stood out. I mean, I think 2024 was disastrous in so many ways, right? I mean, even at the state level, look at Hochul and the congestion pricing mess, right? I thought that was self-inflicted. And I mean, obviously, all the Adams stuff is, and despite this, grander stuff, grander level stuff, I mean, there are things happening at the local level, right? We have people that are doing the right things at the local level, but it's hard for me to say this is a winner that stood out. I mean, I just thought, I'm being pessimistic here,
No,
but
no,
I
please,
just
no
thought
worries.
it was more negative than positive, and I hope 2025 is different.
That's right. That's where we're going now. 2025. What are your predictions? Pull out the crystal ball, Eli.
Man, since 2016, I've been bad at predictions.
It's all right, though. It's all right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, Eli.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. Well, I have to say this. I think with the mayoral race, and obviously that's what most of us will think about first, not exclusively, but first. But we have to. I think we have to keep an eye out on Andrew Cuomo, whether he jumps in
Mm.
or not. I think he will be the factor that could, shift some of the dynamics of the race, and I think he will be the person to beat. I don't think we should discount Scott Stringer. Um, I see momentum happening for Scott Stringer, both on the fundraising part. But think about this. I mean, I like to look at the technical parts of campaigns a lot. Um, Scott Stringer, for me, is the only one right now that's really building a campaign infrastructure. And that is, I mean, he's building the team. And I don't see that happening with others like I see it happening for Scott Stringer. I think that will all come together, and it'll help him, despite the controversy that he had to deal with last time. But I do think that there will be momentum for Scott Stringer. He's someone I think we gotta keep an eye out
Yeah, but
for. But
no, but that's not a prediction, Eli.
that's not a prediction.
I want you to make a prediction. Does Andrew Cuomo run?
I think Andrew Cuomo runs, and
That's the
and
prediction then.
that's
For
my
what?
prediction. He runs for mayor.
Why? What would lead you to believe that he runs for mayor?
Well, one, he wants to get back in the game. At least um, that's the perception out there. I think that's what we can gather from Andrew Cuomo. I think although obviously, right, the governorship is what he may be wanting more. But listen, I mean, who I forgot who it was. Who was the person that said that after being president, being mayor of the city of New York is the next best thing. I mean, the city of New York is the city of New York, and the city charter gives the mayor, and you know this very well, gives the mayor a lot of power. And I think that is one thing that will entice Andrew Cuomo. He'll be back in the game. People will have to contend with him, and I can see that being something enticing for Cuomo. And listen, and despite the baggage that he comes with, but I think Cuomo appeals to a lot of people that 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 will see him as someone that will have the courage to tackle the difficult challenges that the city is facing.
Mm.
So, and listen, and the name. I mean, there's, I mean, the Cuomo name goes back to right late 70s when Mario Cuomo first ran for mayor, and obviously, right, he became governor in the 80s. So, and his son, I mean, the Cuomo name resonates with a lot of people, despite the baggage. But the Cuomo name is still strong. And by the way, the Cuomo name is strong, especially in communities of color. So, a lot of African Americans and a lot of Latinos, they they like Cuomo, right? So I think he'll be formidable.
So
So
let's say
yes, that would be my
conceivably,
prediction. He
no,
runs.
no, but let's say Mayor Adams and he's running. Don't they have?
Yeah.
Don't aren't they trying to appeal to the same base?
Yes, yes, to some degree, yes. The thing is, well, obviously, who will garner more support. I just think that Eric Adams is so, um I mean, the reputation is so tarnished right now that I don't see him, especially with Latinos. I don't see him getting the same level of support among Latino voters as he did last time. So so I think part of the coalition that helped Adams win is will be, I mean, he's going to go in splintered with this. It's not going to be the same coalition, and like you said, it's a similar coalition that Cuomo may be looking at to get him over the top. I just think that between Cuomo and Adams, Cuomo will come into this in a stronger position.
Interesting. Any other predictions before we wrap, Eli, or is that it? That Andrew Cuomo runs for mayor?
And I think Mark Levine wins the
Okay,
controller's
okay,
race.
got it. Okay. Mark Levine
And
was
by the way,
controller.
and I would say that's probably the easiest one for me.
There you
I,
go.
I I just think they're gonna be. I mean, there's for what Justin Brennan is running, I believe, right, for controller.
Hmm.
Um, the assemblywoman
Raj
from,
Kumar.
yes, she's running. I think Mark Levine will be able to put together a coalition that'll get him over the top. So
Got it.
so I would say if there's a victor that I can predict a little bit more comfortably, I would say Mark Levine would be the next city controller.
Let's wrap this up. Who would you say in your lifetime was the premier Latino politician and or operator? Latino or Latina?
Wow, that's a great one. Well, since I've been alive,
Mm-hmm.
since I've been active, I would have to say Freddie Ferrer.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, Badillo was the first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think he paved the way for many, not just Badillo, by the way, but certainly, right? He was the first that Latinos in the city would say, yes, that's our guy, right? This is our leader. And by the way, I don't think we've had anyone, um, at least right politically, that like that since.
Oh yeah, I
Not-
agree. I agree.
right now, but I would say that in my years of active participation, I would have to say Freddie Ferrer.
Okay.
I just I mean, and look, Badillo was the first, but he never won the Democratic nomination.
Yeah, but in all fairness to Badillo, the numbers were nowhere near what they are now. So what he
No, that right.
accomplished at that time was extremely impressive.
Oh yes,
My mother
absolutely.
came to this country in the '60s, and she still remembers Herman Badillo.
Yes,
Because of
absolutely.
he was a pioneer, because he was the first, right? I mean,
Exactly.
the name
Exactly.
resonated. It's just
Absolutely. I mean, yeah, the level of influence is not comparable to
oh
anyone.
yeah, oh yeah, but
Since absolutely, I would say, and I think again, the last person last Latino that that we could easily say, yeah, this guy could be the one, was probably Fernando Ferrer. Now,
mhm.
Ruben Diaz Jr. was one, and I would say, by the way, I think he could have won the mayoral race last time, and he bowed out. I mean,
Mm,
we all know he was getting ready for it. I mean, I think there was a path for him, and he would
interesting.
have been very formidable. But even with that kind of potential that he had, um, I I say Fernando Ferrer was a different caliber, right? And I think there was just a different uh, I think there was a more viable path for a Freddie Ferrer type,
Wow, interesting.
and what he offered. Yeah.
Wow, it's great insight, Eli. Thank you so much for coming on such short notice, man. And
Oh,
hopefully,
listen,
this is the beginning of many conversations on this platform. I want to wish you a happy New Year, man. And I want to thank you again for hopping on, brother. All the best to you.
thank you. This was fun. I'm glad you're doing this, and thanks for having me.
Always, Eli. Thank
Happy
you,
New Year to you.
thank you for your insight. All the best to you and your family. Bye bye.
Thank you.